Okay. So this is the Roman Empire at its greatest, in the red. So here is Rome. It is Italy, shaped like a boot, kicking Sicily, which is the soccer ball. But Rome is right about there. And it is where this entire empire started, which is really impressive. It was constantly expanding as an empire as they went on more conquests for the land. And the Roman Empire was, of course, where Latin was most spoken. So there were three major political eras in Rome: when it was a kingdom, a republic, and an empire. When it was a kingdom, there were actually 7 total kings of Rome. It did last from 743 to 509 BCE, but there were only 7 kings in that time. And kings were eventually frowned upon after a king's son raped a leading citizen's wife, Lucretia, which led her to commit suicide. So that kind of gave a bad name to all the kings, and they eventually moved on to a republic. Obviously, there were other reasons why the kingdom didn't work, but that was the main tipping point. The republic was composed of a senate and 2 consuls. Consuls were elected every year, and there were 2 of them to balance out each other's power. And the Senate was where the US gets its Senate and House. It was kind of structured that way. It was very dysfunctional. People would pay for votes to get into the Senate or to be a consul, and you could only vote in one place in the entire empire. And also only wealthy male landowners could hold office. And there were also lots of restrictions on voting, so definitely not a great democracy. And they eventually had to go onto an empire, which lasted quite a while, from 27 BCE to 476 CE. And the first emperor, Augustus, also known as Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, or really any of those, sometimes he's known as just Gaius or Julius or Octavian, but Augustus is his main name. He was a self-proclaimed emperor, so he was probably just elected as a consul and then just decided he would be emperor. And a lot of military failures resulted in the end of this era and eventually the end of the Roman Empire. This is a quote from him. He said, "I found Rome a city of bricks and left it a city of marbles." And while very boastful, this isn't untrue. He definitely did make a lot of good change in Rome, and the empire started out as a place where a lot of positive change was being made in Rome. So now, does anyone have any questions on that section before we move on to vocab? You can put them in the chat or say them out loud. Okay, so moving on to vocab. This is just going to cover the most commonly used words in Latin. And you can take notes, and I'm also going to put this slideshow up on the Google Classroom if you want to take notes from there or just review from there. But just a few quick notes. The letter V in Latin is always pronounced like a W. So the word for high is spelled S-A-L-V-E. It kind of sounds like salve, or it looks like that, but it's actually pronounced salve. And C's in Latin are also always pronounced as cuz, not sus. Yeah. So these are the most common nouns. They're just basic common nouns in English as well. Ego, meaning I. Tu, meaning you. Vos, meaning you all, which is the plural, or like you can also say y'all. Nos, meaning we. Is, ea, id, he, she, that. It isn't on there, but, and hic, hike, hoc as this, and nihil meaning nothing. And these are the most common verbs. Amo, I love. Kepo, I take. Do, I give. Video, I see. Weneo, I come. Habeo, I have. And duco, I lead. And does anyone notice anything about the endings of these verbs and their translations? Yeah, that's right. They all end in O. And the ending O in Latin for a verb translates to I in English. So there's, you don't have to know this right now, but it goes OST, must, tis, nt. Those are the endings. And it means I, you, he, she, it, we, you all, and they. So there's a song, OST must nt, OST must nt, but we'll learn that later. So the endings in verbs really mean a lot with how they're translated. And we can see these verbs also end in different meanings. Weni, witty, wiki is a famous phrase. If any of you have heard it, that's really cool. It means I came, I saw, I conquered. And it is what a famous conqueror said when he conquered his land. I believe it was Caesar. But these all end in I, which is why they are past tense. I came, I saw, I conquered, rather than I come, I see, I conquer. Azalea, do you want to expand on that? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that.
Oh, sorry. I just when you said the word like money, like those three words before, just remind me of like this fun song.
I've never heard it, but if you want to send that to me or put it in the chat, a link, that would be fine. Okay. Yeah. So the next part is syntax and how phrases are compiled in Latin, which is how they go together. And yeah, this is the main thing. The word order does not matter. In a lot of languages, word order, especially in Mandarin Chinese, word order is like really complicated and difficult, for me at least. But in a lot of languages, word order matters a lot. That's not to say there aren't general rules that words follow to be in order, but if you go back to Rome, anyone will understand your sentences no matter what order your words are in, because it does not matter. So the common placements that there are that you can look for that can help with translating Latin is the verb goes last in the sentence and the noun generally goes first. And of course, adjectives are next to the nouns. But when translating English to Latin, it doesn't matter which order you put the words in. They will be easier understood if you put the verb last and the noun first, but it generally does not matter. So Latin uses cases to conjugate nouns, conjugations and tenses to conjugate verbs, and moods to clearly define what's being said. This is also probably a good thing to write down if you want to. The cases for nouns are nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative, and vocative, and they all have their meanings. So you put a noun in the nominative case if it's the subject, the genitive case to represent possession, the dative case if it's an indirect object, the accusative case if it's a direct object, the ablative case if it's an object of a preposition, and the vocative case if you are like yelling at someone or like talking really directly to them. Also totally okay if you don't understand these at all, but all of these cases have their own specific endings that they go with. So the conjugations, there are 4 conjugations, although there's technically 5 because 3 is split into 2 parts, but the first through the 4th conjugation. And this is how verbs are grouped. They're all grouped based on their endings. So they all end in a set of 3 letters, ARE, IRE, ERE, long ERE, things like that. And they're grouped together like that, and they all have their sets of rules. Latin grammar is one of the most confusing things you'll ever encounter grammar-wise. And this is mainly why. Because every single verb has to be grouped multiple times, and each group has its own set of very distinct rules. There are also tenses in Latin, which represent time. So there's the present tense, which is probably what we'll mainly be working in, but there's also the imperfect, the future, the perfect, the pluperfect, and the future perfect tenses to represent different times when actions are being taken. So there are also moods, which are indicative, imperative, and subjunctive. And those are also different things that are good to know, but are difficult to learn because of all the groupings that they're in. And also there's something called the passive tense, where if you say something in the passive, it's like something is being done to the object, like I picked up the pen, or the pen was picked up by me. That's the difference. The passive is the second sentence that I said. Okay, so does anyone have any questions before I start going over the homework? Yes. Do you just want me to go back to this slide, or do you want me to talk more about them? I'm just going to assume go back to the slide unless you say something else. Okay, cool. Let me just review in the chat. Yeah, Arabic seems really hard, but it's not that difficult once you learn the alphabet. Byzantine Empire. Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay. So I would love it if we could do some practice with the nouns and the verbs before we go on to the homework. So maybe I need to give you more nouns. We can check out this website that I found here that has a bunch of common nouns and verbs that we can learn about. So for instance, let's just pick one of these and we can practice with the verbs. So how about hair? Capillus. If hair is capillus, based on this slide, how would you say, I take hair? Anyone? Yes. How would you say, I see hair? Anyone? Ego capillus vitae. Okay. Yes, I guess that does work. Yes. Okay. How would you say, we have hair? That might be difficult. And we can also look at the chat at how who said this? About how Candida said ego capillus vitae. She just took off the O in vitae to mean, because she substituted the ego for I. So if we wanted to substitute nos for we, how would we say, we have hair? Yeah, great. Does anyone, wait. Yeah, that's also true because word order doesn't matter. Well, does anyone have any other questions before I go over the homework on content? Okay. So for the homework, I have a couple of things linked. I think I have them linked on the Google Classroom now, if you want to check that out. but essentially it is a worksheet with 10 questions about history. And then later on, I'm also going to link possibly other worksheets reviewing Latin. I wasn't sure if we would get through all of that, but it seems that we did. If you have any questions, make sure to reach out to me or stay behind if you have immediate ones. It was really nice to meet all of you, and I will see you next week.